The myth of the werewolf, a human capable of transforming into a wolf or wolf-like creature, is one of the oldest and most enduring supernatural legends in human history. Rooted in ancient beliefs and deeply embedded in European folklore, the werewolf has evolved from a symbol of primal fear and savagery into a complex figure that continues to captivate popular imagination. Early accounts of werewolves, such as the Greek myth of Lycaon, often frame the transformation as divine punishment, while medieval and early modern European societies saw werewolves as manifestations of demonic forces or curses. Throughout history, werewolves have occupied a terrifying and mysterious space. These shape-shifting creatures, humans transformed into wolves, were feared for their brutal violence, often blamed for deaths and disappearances that communities couldn't explain. While werewolves are now popular figures in horror fiction, many historical accounts of supposed werewolves stemmed from real events that shocked and horrified medieval and early modern societies. In cases where individuals committed acts of unspeakable brutality, such as serial killings or cannibalism, local populations often turned to supernatural explanations, unable to comprehend how a human being could commit such atrocities. This led to the creation of myths that framed these individuals as werewolves, humans cursed or possessed by dark forces whose transformations into savage beasts could explain their violent acts. The concept of humans transforming into wolves or wolf-like creatures dates back to ancient times. In Greek mythology, there's the story of Lycaon, who was transformed into a wolf as a punishment from Zeus. Lycaon was a king of Arcadia, a region in ancient Greece, known for his arrogance and impiety. The most famous version of his myth involves a direct challenge to the authority of Zeus, the king of the gods. According to the myth, Zeus descended to earth in human form to observe the behavior of mortals and to judge whether they were deserving of his wrath. Lycaon, skeptical of Zeus' divinity and filled with disdain for the gods, decided to test Zeus by offering him a grotesque feast. He slaughtered one of his own sons and served his flesh to Zeus, either to deceive the god or to mock him. Zeus, horrified and enraged by this monstrous act, revealed his true form. In response to Lycaon's crime of murder and sacrilege, Zeus punished him by transforming him into a wolf. In this form, Lycaon retained his human mind but was cursed to live as a savage beast, reflecting his inner cruelty and bloodlust. The transformation into a wolf was a symbolic punishment, as wolves were seen as embodiments of savagery and the rejection of civilized behavior. Lycaon's myth became one of the foundational stories associated with werewolves, or the concept of lycanthropy, the ability to transform into a wolf. The term lycanthropy comes from Lycaon's name, directly linking the idea of humans turning into wolves to his myth. Lycaon's story is a cautionary tale about hubris, disrespect for the gods, and the consequences of sacrilege. It underscores the belief that those who act with cruelty and barbarism will themselves be reduced to beasts, losing their humanity in the process. His transformation into a wolf also taps into primal fears of bestiality and the loss of control, themes that continue to resonate in the werewolf myths that evolved from this ancient tale. European folklore surrounding werewolves is one of the most influential strands of werewolf mythology, and it varies across regions, cultures, and periods of history. The werewolf legend, humans transforming into wolves, has existed in many forms throughout Europe, from ancient beliefs to the witch trials of the early modern period and beyond. In early European societies, wolves were both revered and feared for their cunning and ferocity, and stories of men turning into wolves emerge from these complex relationships with nature. In Norse myths, there are references to humans turning into wolves, or warriors transformed into fierce, uncontrollable beasts. One of the most famous examples are the stories of the Ulfhednar, a type of berserker who wore wolf pelts and fought with the strength and fury of a wolf. These warriors believed that by donning the skin of a wolf, they could channel its ferocity. The Ulfhednar were a type of elite warrior in Norse mythology and Viking culture, renowned for their ferocity and their close association with wolves. They are often considered a subset of the berserkers, another group of Viking warriors who were said to fight with an uncontrollable animalistic rage. However, while berserkers were linked to bears, the Ulfhednar were connected to wolves, and their name literally means wolf coats or wolf hides in Old Norse. The Ulfhednar are described as wearing wolf skins or cloaks into battle. This was believed to help them channel the ferocity, strength, and instincts of a wolf, making them fearsome opponents on the battlefield. By wearing the pelts, they were thought to spiritually and physically embody the attributes of the wolf. Like the berserkers, the Ulfhednar were believed to enter a state of battle frenzy during combat. In this trance-like state, they became incredibly strong, immune to pain, and exhibited a nearly supernatural aggression. This made them not only terrifying to their enemies, but also sometimes uncontrollable, as they could potentially turn their violence on allies if their rage overtook them. In Norse culture, wolves were both revered and feared, seen as symbols of war, chaos, and death, but also cunning and survival. The Ulfhednar's connection to wolves reflected this duality. Their wolf-like behavior in battle, hunting in packs, displaying coordinated ferocity, added to their effectiveness. Wolves were also associated with Odin, the chief of the Norse gods, who was frequently accompanied by two wolves, Geri and Freki. The Ulfhednar were considered to be favoured by Odin, with some sources even suggesting they acted as his warriors. There was a strong mystical component to the Ulfhednar's identity. Like berserkers, they were thought to possess shamanic powers, possibly engaging in rituals that allowed them to summon the spirit of the wolf. Some scholars have speculated that Ulfhednar may have practiced rites of initiation that involved entering altered states of consciousness, where they believed they could take on the mind and strength of a wolf. Revered and feared in Norse society, they have left a lasting impression on Viking mythology and warrior traditions, embodying the wild power and savagery associated with wolves, and continuing to inspire legends and modern interpretations of Norse culture. In Slavic folklore, werewolves or Vulkodlak were feared as evil creatures that could shapeshift into wolves. This transformation might occur due to a curse, punishment for sinful behavior, or as a result of a pact with dark forces or the devil. Some stories suggest that the person has little control over when the transformation happens, while others describe it as a willful or ritualistic act. In some regions, werewolves were also associated with vampires. Like the traditional werewolf, the Vulkodlak is often depicted as a predatory figure that hunts at night, especially during the full moon. It is believed to attack livestock, people, or anyone who crosses its path. The Vulkodlak is not just a shapeshifter, but also a restless, undead being. It might rise from the grave, much like a vampire, and cause harm to the living by attacking them or draining their life essence. Similar to werewolf lore in Western Europe, silver was believed to be effective against the Vulkodlak, capable of killing or repelling the creature. Crosses, holy water, or prayers were also considered means of protection, especially since the creature was often associated with dark forces or the devil. In the cases where the Vulkodlak was seen as an undead vampire-like being, it was thought that staking it through the heart or burning its body would prevent it from rising again to cause harm. In the Balkans, there was a widespread belief in lycanthropy, the ability of certain people to transform into wolves. However, these werewolves were not always seen as evil. Some were viewed as protectors who helped defend villages from supernatural threats. Still, many legends held that werewolves could bring plagues or cause other disasters. During the Middle Ages, the idea of werewolves began to develop into more sinister and supernatural forms, largely influenced by the spread of Christianity across Europe. Werewolves began to be associated with witchcraft and demonic possession during the medieval period. Church teachings often depicted werewolves as individuals who had made pacts with the devil or were being punished by God. This led to a shift in the way werewolves were viewed, from animalistic warriors or cursed men to agents of evil, often tied to dark supernatural forces. In medieval European lore, many believed that individuals became werewolves involuntarily, often as a result of being cursed. Popular beliefs held that certain people who committed grave sins could become wolves. The full moon, a powerful symbol in many ancient religions, became linked to this transformation, possibly due to its association with the supernatural and madness. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, Europe experienced widespread fear of witches, and this period also saw a rise in werewolf accusations. These werewolf trials ran parallel to the better-known witch trials, particularly in regions like France, Germany, and Switzerland. France had numerous werewolf legends, and during the werewolf trials, it was believed that wolves or werewolves terrorized the countryside. Stories like that of Jean Grenier, a teenage boy who claimed to turn into a wolf and hunt children, exemplified the fear of the time. In many French tales, werewolves, loup-garous, could become wolves through magical ointments or curses. In France, one of the most famous werewolf legends is that of the Beast of Gévaudan. Between 1764 and 1767, a large wolf-like creature terrorized the rural region of Gévaudan, killing dozens of people. Although it was eventually killed, the legend grew, and many believed the creature was a werewolf or sent by dark forces. Germanic folklore emphasized the werewolf pact, a belief that someone became a werewolf by making a pact with a dark power or the devil. Stories often included magical belts or wolf skins that would allow the wearer to transform into a wolf at will. The idea of men turning into wolves through magic was very prominent in German-speaking areas. One of the most infamous cases occurred in Germany in the late 16th century, involving a man named Peter Stump. He was accused of being a werewolf, and under torture he confessed to having made a pact with the devil that gave him the ability to transform into a wolf. He claimed to have murdered several people, including children. His case became widely known as an example of werewolf hysteria tied to witch trials. The European trials frequently connected werewolf transformations to acts of cannibalism. This was reflective of medieval fears around the violation of human norms and taboos. Werewolves were depicted as bloodthirsty creatures who preyed on humans, often eating children or travelers. Werewolf cases, especially those from the early modern period, can be interpreted as instances where serial killers were perceived as supernatural beings, such as werewolves, by local populations who could not fathom how a human could commit such heinous acts. In these societies where superstition and religious belief dominated explanations for deviant behavior, acts of extreme violence such as murder and cannibalism were often linked to demonic possession, witchcraft, or werewolf transformations. During the medieval and early modern periods, communities often lacked the scientific understanding we have today about human psychology, deviant behavior, and criminal pathology. Violent acts like serial killings were outside the realm of their understanding, and the idea of a person repeatedly committing such crimes without supernatural influence seemed impossible. These societies often turned to supernatural explanations, like werewolf transformations, to make sense of incomprehensible violence. The belief in werewolves also reflected deeper fears about the collapse of the boundary between human and animal, and between civilization and barbarism. Additionally, accusations of werewolfism were frequently tied to social outcasts, people living on the margins of society, or those seen as physically different. In rural communities, someone living in isolation or someone perceived as mentally unstable could easily be turned into a scapegoat for any misfortune, including brutal crimes. The werewolf myth underwent significant transformation with the rise of literature, especially from the 18th century onward. While early folklore and medieval accounts often portrayed werewolves as cursed beings or victims of sorcery, literature began to shape and refine the werewolf into a more complex figure. By the 19th and 20th centuries, the werewolf became a prominent character in Gothic fiction, horror literature, and eventually cinema. Werewolves fit well into the Gothic tradition, which emphasized eerie settings, supernatural beings, and intense emotions like terror and dread. Writers used the werewolf myth to explore themes of guilt, identity, and transformation. The werewolf's dual nature, caught between man and beast, reflected the romantic fascination with the untamed aspects of nature and the human soul. As the Victorian era unfolded, werewolves became symbols of suppressed desires and the tension between societal expectations and hidden primal urges. This was especially significant in a time when rigid moral codes were in place, and any break from these norms was often depicted as monstrous or dangerous. The werewolf became more tragic in Victorian literature, representing individuals cursed with their condition, torn between their humanity and the beast within. The Man-Wolf, 1857 by Erkman Chatrian, is a notable early werewolf novel that emerged during this period, blending folklore and Gothic elements to create a story of horror and supernatural transformation. Sabine Baring-Gould, an English scholar and writer, published The Book of Werewolves in 1865, a comprehensive study of werewolf folklore. This work popularized werewolf stories in the English-speaking world and influenced future depictions in fiction. The 20th century saw a dramatic expansion of the werewolf myth, particularly with the rise of cinema and horror fiction. The werewolf began to shift from folklore-based origins to more sophisticated literary and cinematic depictions. The 1930s and 1940s were a golden age for monster films, and Universal Pictures played a significant role in cementing the werewolf in modern horror. One of the most iconic portrayals of the werewolf came with The Wolfman, 1941, starring Lon Chaney Jr. This film cemented many of the now standard tropes of werewolf mythology. The transformation triggered by the full moon, the vulnerability to silver, and the tragic curse that turns a man into a monster against his will. The Wolfman solidified the image of the werewolf as a sympathetic figure, someone cursed with a terrible affliction, and reinforced the association of werewolves with the full moon and silver bullets, elements that weren't prominent in earlier folklore. In literature and film, werewolves began to embody themes of psychological horror. The transformation into a wolf was often used as a metaphor for uncontrollable desires or the darker aspects of the human psyche. This was especially prominent in the early 20th century, as psychoanalysis became more widely accepted, and the werewolf became a symbol of the repressed aspects of the human mind. In contemporary literature and media, werewolves are often portrayed as more humanized, sympathetic characters. Modern werewolf stories, such as those in urban fantasy and paranormal romance, frequently focus on themes of identity, belonging, and control. The werewolf, once a symbol of pure evil or curse, is now often depicted as someone struggling with their dual nature. From their origins in ancient folklore and medieval superstition, werewolves have undergone significant transformation in literature and media. In the 18th and 19th centuries, they became symbols of inner conflict and moral dilemmas, while the 20th century saw them evolve into tragic, psychologically complex figures. Today, the werewolf remains a versatile character in horror, fantasy, and romance, representing themes of transformation, identity, and the struggle between human nature and primal instinct.